Hello and welcome to the Pinkbike podcast. My name is Henry, and this week we're beginning to outnumber you. I am joined by fellow Brit Jessie-May, and Dario. You've got the sole responsibility of doing North America proud as we.
It's a big job these days.
Yeah, use weird turns of phrase that you have no idea what they mean. Everything's going to sound. All the foods are going to sound like they're not foods. All the conversations are going to have so many weird bits. Like, what was my friend the other day? A chin wag. They loved it. My Canadian friends.
A little chin wag. I like that.
A little chin wag. We'll have a little chin wag today. The snow's here, Dario.
Yeah.
In our little corner. I've spent the weekend having the most Squamish weekend ever. I went climbing and I went skiing.
Oh.
Why do these people hate toes so much? My toes are just ruined. Why do they hate what they got against toes?
Having at one point mostly rock climbed with my time, I was not an evangelist of the super tight shoe program. I think it's wrong. But I guess if you're really you're a real sender and you want some super pointy feet, you can do that. It's not pleasant though. Yeah.
I actually bought some shoes and then I went to the charity shop and got a pre-stained t-shirt so I fit in at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And
consider getting rid of your toenails just now.
You could, honestly, or remove the pinky toe. Yeah.
Jessie, you're up in Scotland. Is all year riding still a thing where you are? Has the winter come in a bit?
It is, yeah. I think especially if you're going to invest in some metal spiky tyres. Like most places in Scotland would be fine all year round. But I do happen to live in the coldest part of Scotland. So it's pretty icy a lot of the time. Although, it's a bit warmer just now.
Does it ring true about, because I was surprised here just how much it rained. I mean, it blew my mind. Do you think the UK reputation of always raining and being miserable is fair?
I think if you live on the West Coast, definitely. If you're a Glaswegians right now are just yeah, for sure. But I'm on the East Coast, so it's a little bit drier.
Just dry and cold, typically.
Yeah. Okay. I'm close to the Cairngorms.
I think the thing is with the UK is that it doesn't always torrential downpour, but it's the consistency of the rain. It can just be kind of drizzling for weeks on end. And then the concrete we use is the same colour and everything's just grey. And then our faces are grey. And then we go to Greg's and eat grey food.
Food is grey, yeah.
Yeah, everything is grey. So we definitely don't help ourselves. Well, let's get into some show and tells. And Jessie, your one's pretty interesting because, listen, the unintentional rage bait of 29 is coming out probably kickstarted Pinkbike in earnest and turned it from pokey BC website to worldwide news website. People love to hate different wheel sizes. This one could be justified. What's your show and tell?
Yeah, we might have a new one on the way, a 32 inch. So we've seen a new Maxxis Aspen tyre on a bike from a brand called Dirty Sixer, and it's a 32-inch wheel bicycle. So we've been in touch with Maxxis, and they have said that it's still under prototyping and it's not going to be ready for production anytime soon. I'm sure the very tall people that are riding 32-inch wheel bicycles are going to be pretty stoked about a new option. But it's more broadly interesting than that because Maxxis is the largest bicycle tyre manufacturer in the world. And so it's an indication that maybe they are preparing for a new wheel size. I don't think I would necessarily benefit quite so much as maybe our colleague Seb. But
Jessie, you would be in the bike like Batman on his motorbike.
Truly.
You'd have to have the handlebars on the fork crowns and you'd just be lying, like the opposite of a recumbent when you're completely lying flat. Mm-hmm. But it's weird though, isn't it, that we're going from the gap between 27 and 29 is actually even less than you'd be led to believe by the name, in that it's closer to a 28 inch anyway. Is it not a huge jump? We know how much difference it makes between a 27.5 to a 29. To then go to a 32 seems extreme to me.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why they've chosen 32 inch as opposed to 30. Dario, do you know?
I don't know. My best guess is it's splitting the difference, because brands have experimented already with 36-inch wheels and found that was, you start to hit the limits of what you can achieve with like typical wheel building in terms of like keeping tension and making sure that they actually perform. And I've ridden some 36-inch bikes and they're pretty odd. You know, you can roll up a curb without feeling it, which is cool. But when it comes to like cornering and doing anything at speed, they start to feel a little vague and freaky. So I think my best guess is brands decided to split the difference between 36 and 29 and hit somewhere in the middle, but I'm not really sure. It's pretty hard to experiment with this stuff because there's so many contingent factors. You know, you have to have the rim, you have to have the tire, you have to have spokes and hubs and frames, and everything has to fit together. So you kind of just have to choose one.
And there is no UCI stipulation on the maximum wheel size for cross country and downhill.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why they couldn't at least try it.
I mean, obviously the Aspen is an XC tire, so that kind of indicates where the development is happening. But do you think that this could be a downhill benefit?
I think like there's geometry considerations to be made, obviously, with like clearance at the fork and the shape of the down tube and things like that. Yeah, I don't know if they would want head angles to go that much slacker.
Yeah, fair.
Do you know if there was any pre-existing standard for this size to hop onto? Again, talking about 27.5, it was already able to be there because of the 650p road standard. Is it a brand new? Because that would require extra tooling, which would suggest that maybe 32-inch. To be honest, it's like kind of like the meme coin of currency. That's what it seems like to me. It's like, do you know what I mean? It's like it's kind of tokenistic. I don't know if I'm not sure it'll really catch on, but I'm also absolutely prepared to be wrong. Do you know if there's any pre-existing standard to that?
It wouldn't match that WTB 700B standard that they came out with for gravel. That's just like,
I don't think so.
Slightly larger than 29-inch.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Jesus.
I don't know. You know, I was pretty open-minded with. I am pretty open-minded with all new things. You know, like if there's a new standard, I'd hope that it is required by some advance in engineering that drives it. And in this case, like if the testing bears out that 32 inches better, then it could be cool. But I just don't know.
I think the question that will be on a lot of people's lips with that is define better.
Right. I mean, for cross-country racers, faster, like if you can keep higher speed at less effort, I suppose that's the metric here that they're testing for. But I have so many parts that fit together and I like my Lego set and I don't want to add a new block type to that Lego set necessarily.
Perhaps it would be a mullet cross-country bike though. Just a 32-inch front wheel.
That would be, yeah, I think so.
Rear.
That could be cool. It's also like, it was how they would get around the frame element of testing, sure. You know, run a lower travel 32-inch friendly fork, maybe an inverted fork, and then not have to do a new carbon rear end.
How do you guys feel about, because I did an op-ed a couple of years ago, and I still stand by it to an extent, that proprietary parts are sometimes really important for just getting our bicycles to actually be better. I don't necessarily want but I don't know, I think we have this thing where...
Proprietary in what sense? Like,
for instance, with proprietary spokes.
Oh.
If they can make a wheel be so much better. You know?
Yeah.
Whether they can or not is not the question. Whether they do or not is not the question that I'm focused on. If they could,
yeah.
Like, do we sometimes need to actually not on your entry to even upper mid-level stuff, but on your really fancy bits of kit, if it can be reliable, which is a big thing, and if all the checks and balances are in place, should we be baked into having, say for instance, we've seen like these spokes go out from Bird, like these string spokes, and honestly I think they could really have an application somewhere, but I think it would just require, I don't know, maybe,
I mean, those are almost more like ubiquitous in a sense, like because they can fit to existing hubs as long as they can be drilled for that fitment, and then they fit a regular rim. You look at like Industry 9's weird aluminum spokes, like those are very unique to their wheel sets, as are like the carbon spokes that Specialized or Roval used in their recent cross-country wheels. Like, I think in those cases, yeah, like there's an argument to be made that they're achieving some performance goal with something that you cannot buy at a bike shop. But
I think the answer is yes, Henry. Like, if someone has made something that is definitely a performance advantage, then like,
yeah,
Pump up the jam.
why should we not be embracing that?
Up, keep
You know?
it going.
Unless it
I
actually
suppose
costs
so.
the earth
Yeah.
or,
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what your goal is too. It's like if you're trying to build a really high performance bike that you can go on a road trip with and not worry about it, then perhaps it's failing at that. But
Sorry, that's just to hang it up there. That is such an interesting point, because so much when we talk about the reliability of our bicycles, the first thing that comes up is when you go on a road trip. And I'm not saying that's not important. Let me finish. I'm not saying it's not important, but why have a bike that potentially is not working as well anywhere, so it works a bit better when you go far away from home?
Yeah. No, I don't mean making concessions towards that. I find myself often enough away from support for a part that I have to where it's like something worth considering. Or like you look at like whenever I've talked to mechanics who do the full World Cup circuit, and as you've experienced, you know, if you're someone who brings a bike with you to all the stops, like a big part of the consideration there is like how durable the frame bearings are. Like something that you wouldn't necessarily think about as the first and foremost factor if you're just buying a good trail bike for home. Maybe it's something that's more important if you're often in far-flung places.
So a brief technical issue there. Jessie-May's camera's just overheated, so we're going on to the webcam, but I'm sure you'll all cope. My show and tell this week is sort of more of a quite a general thing, but it comes down to a clear question. I was rebuilding my friend's shock for him at the weekend. Basically, what you typically do is when you have a shim stack is you put an Allen key through the shims and then you lift all them all up so they stay in order. And it was a bit of a happening, and the shims ended up in a non-optimal order. But on the RockShox website, they now just have all the shims in it. They have like, you know, the 30 different compression stacks you can use and the 20 different rebound stacks, and they just list them out and you can just measure them up and away you go and everything's fine, which I love. I think that's got better across the industry. Fox and RockShox are both doing a really good job of that now. Jesse, we're also seeing, I think over the last couple of years, the cycling audience in general becoming more literate with tech documents, in particular patents. Do you think that the two are tied in any way? Like the fact that, you know, there's this sort of like growing interest, or at least growing perceived interest in the audience for these things, and it feels like a note of quality to have these tech documents on display? Or do you think it is just, I'm reading too much into it and these brands are just doing it for their service centers?
I would hope that brands are just more just like prioritizing like the customer's experience as a whole, like handing customers the opportunity to tune their suspension to suit themselves. So putting an element of trust into their hands.
Venture a guess that it's customer facing as much as it is service center facing. Like the fact that it's not behind a login wall, I think is a indication of that. Like I remember working as a mechanic, sometimes tech documents required you to have, you know, access to some part of the website, and that was fine for certain procedures. Maybe you don't want anyone being able to just like get their expensive item, but then again, it's like it's your shock, your derailleur, your
you
whatever. Like you might as well know how to fix it. And like as right to repair laws, you know, proliferate, I think that that's what we'll see more of. Like whether it's easy to do or not is almost besides the point, but having the knowledge and tools to do it, I think, is key.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because the DT Swiss spoke calculator used to be passworded,
right?
Which is crazy. I mean, I think it was just like excellent wheels or something, you know, like Swiss made or some, you know, silly thing. But yeah, it was like there was a login thing.
Yeah.
But do you think that, I don't know, it's weird because I think there was a time where brands actively didn't want you in their stuff, and now they're kind of like, it's a bit like, you know, being a teenager and the parents are like, if you're gonna drink, I'll buy you beer.
Yeah, do it here.
Do it here.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Instead
true.
of just, eyeballing vodka in a bus stop. It's like it's a
Right.
bit more like civilized.
I think that's true. I also think as parts have gotten better and in ways more complex, they've also gotten easier to work on. Like the amount of like weird bleed fittings and strange proprietary tools has kind of fallen a little bit. Part of that is just normalizing between brands. Like as people realize that using the same socket size makes sense because it's ubiquitous, I think we'll see more ease of modification or service or whatever, which I'm a fan of.
Do you think, just with regards to the paintings as well, do you think brands, I don't know, do you think ever the patent is a ploy to sort of, because now they know it's going to get reported on, they're not making everything they paint, and that's just not how the whole model and business works. But sometimes I wonder if they would put out something they're just like, this is going to get on Pinkbike, and they're going to think, like there's that thing with the RockShox where they're putting a solar panel on the back of a mudguard, the Charger XS battery.
Wild.
And they were probably like, it's probably just like those schmucks, they actually wrote up an article like that was something we're going to do. I mean, maybe they will, but
I'm waiting.
I guess
you know what I mean?
For April
you keep
1st
guessing
to see what patents are published to the database.
Oh, I like that.
Like,
Yeah.
If I was in the department writing patents, in the knowledge that the media were very switched on and perusing them all the time, I would probably try and have a laugh with it and write something crazy up.
I never thought they were doing
To be
them
published
an
on the
ironic
first.
patent.
Very well could. I mean, yeah. The amount of preventative
much to be
patents
lost.
is always, I don't know, surprising to me. It seems like I understand that you're protecting potential IP just as much as you are actionable IP, but it seems like a lot of work to cover traces that might never be stepped in.
I've always thought it'd be super cool to do like a really in-depth, like a retrospect on that specialized 4-bar patent that lasted 25 years and kind of changed. In 2010 it was, oh my god, this single pivot's the best thing ever. Then at midnight, as the clock chimed into the 2011 or whatever it was, wait a minute, this 4-bar's way better. Forget the marketing, forget everything we said.
Yeah.
We were confused and lost.
I mean, yeah, and we're now like long enough post that opening up that you are seeing a lot of brands that at some point had a novel suspension system starting to converge on crab.
I mean, I think that's something that I thought that used to get me really excited when I was really getting into mountain biking, was how different all the bikes looked. Cannondale and Scott were doing pool shocks, things like that. I mean, I know we talked about it before, but the Kona Magic Link.
Yeah, you love that thing. We got to bring back the Gemini, bring back the Magic Link.
Just as someone that I didn't know, I didn't know what all this stuff was, but I saw that it had a second shock and was like, no. There was a bike called the Bionicon in the UK, and it was like, oh man, this thing. I mean, looking back, it wasn't.
I had a friend in California with one of those, actually.
No way.
Yeah.
Not the best looking bike, but there was something like the fact that because it would release, it would change the geometry of the sag and stuff, wouldn't it? Hey. And just and there was those 2-stage bikes out of New Zealand that had 2 air shocks.
Well, so did the Carpiel Armageddon, I think it was. It had air shock and then a giant coil shock. It's actually a pretty good idea in that case because it's like a low rate or like a light spring rate coil shock with an air catch. Essentially,
that's what kind of like Cane Creek are managing to package into one shock almost now.
In a way that like Tygon is kind of that. I've been riding that recently, and it does achieve that. Yeah.
Dario, what's your show and tell this week?
My show and tell is a bicycle that does not have any sort of. Well, it does have a pretty interesting suspension layout, but beyond that, it's pretty delightfully normal. My show and tell is the Spindrift from Propane, big 180 mil. I think they're calling it a super enduro bike. They're separating. So there's an aluminum one that they're calling a free ride bike. The carbon fiber one is super enduro.
Why? What's the difference?
For material. Well, actually, they are like materially different, obviously, like the aluminum versus carbon fiber, but the kinematic and geometry are also different, but very close. Like maybe indecipherably close, but they did go so far as to make them different.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
And it's a cool bike. It's 180 mil travel, so big, but it's, for all intents and purposes, it feels like a trail bike, but in the best way. I can say that. Like, it's fun to like hop around on. It climbs very well. It doesn't feel like a plow by any means. And this is early enough in testing that I don't have like super concrete takes on anything, but it's been a really fun bike, and I don't know, one that I'm looking forward to riding more in the snow today.
So, you know how I have gone on record to say that I think trail bikes are nonsense as a general thing. Hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to have an enduro bike with 160 mil travel, that's basically got a downhill grade shock on, downhill wheels, beefed up frame, yada, 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 and a 38 mil fork, why not make it 180, in for a penny, in for a pound? Jesse, do you see what I mean? Like, travel weighs nothing. Why do we sometimes... Are we not limited by the chassis size of the fork and what the suspension can handle? Do you know what I mean? Instead of... Because it's all the same weight, I guess, by this point. I don't imagine this bike's any heavier, for instance, Dario, than your frameworks.
No, it's quite light, actually. I think it's 36 pounds and change.
Well, there we go.
Basically
Jesse.
an XC bike.
Basically an XC bike. Do you see what I mean? Or do you think... What would be the counter to my argument, do you think?
Probably to sell more bicycles. Just have...
Well, yeah, forget people want to do that.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Travel does weigh nothing. Yeah, I guess you are introducing... I mean, with a fork, you're introducing like a higher stack just by doing that. But... which is not going to suit everyone. Probably the shorter riders in particular. But yeah, perhaps you guys should be just like overforking your bicycles instead of putting your high-rise handlebars on.
Well, when you hear Dario and I talk about how much we like stack, do you ever, as somebody that doesn't ride a size large, think, can you just shut the hell up?
I mean, same with long chainstays. Like, you know, Jesse, I would assume you've had many bikes where the chainstays are longer than the reach.
No, like it's interesting to listen to your discussions about stack. So I have a trail bike at the moment, the Kona Process 134, and it's the small, and it's, I would say it feels a little bit short in the reach for me, but the stack also feels pretty low. It's a 140 fork, so I want it taller, but I don't want the reach any shorter. So one of the first things I will do to that bike is put a high-rise handlebar on it.
What do you think is your... Could you just explain to the listener how tall you are, Jesse, and what do you think your optimal reach figure would be?
I'm 163 centimeters tall, and my optimal reach at the moment, I would say, is about 435. Yeah.
And do you think, I mean, 435, a lot of the time when bike manufacturers make a one-size-fits-all rear end, it will often be around that 435. What do you think about bikes that have... Because I've never had the opportunity to ride a bike that has had match stays to match reach. What's it? Have you ridden many bikes like that? And what did you think?
I have, yeah. Like, my favorite bike of all time was the 27.5 Revel Rail, and that had matched reach to rear center. That's totally anecdotal. I appreciate that. Yeah, like, it's more often the case that I'm riding a bike that has longer stays than the reach. And yeah, I guess I don't know any different. It would be more unusual for me to ride one with shorter chainstays. There was one bike that stood out to me as suffering from the fact that the rear center was like considerably longer than the front center. It was the size small Live Intrigue long travel version. So the stays were like 445 and the reach was like 415.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Damn.
And that's the longest travel bike that Live make. Yeah.
Pointy. I bet that's somewhat pointy.
It was quite interesting on like really steep terrain. I never had an issue with weighting the front wheel in corners.
No,
flat
I
corners.
don't imagine you did.
I just looked up. So you mentioned your ideal reach number being 435. That kind of rang a bell, and I looked up a bike that I owned in 2015, an extra large Canfield Brothers Nimble 9, and the reach was, what was it, 435. It was exactly the same reach as what you ride, and I am almost a foot taller than you.
If you rode that now, you'd constantly feel like you were about to be thrown out the front door.
I mean, that's great. Like, that is genuinely a size small by today's standards. It's cool to think that a decade out, that's how much things have changed.
Just wait until we get the 32-inch wheel on the front of our bikes.
Dude.
Then we're going to have stability. You're going to have maybe, super long rear end to keep all the weight on the front, and a 32-inch wheel so you can't go over it.
And 9
Perfect.
PSI in your front tire.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah. Double digits are for losers, baby.
Mhm.
Right, let's get into some questions. We're going to hit it with the first one.
Hey Pinkers, Anthony in Whitehorse, Yukon. My question is about grip height relative to saddle
Which is
height.
very relevant. Perfect.
Over the
Thank you.
last decade, my grips have certainly gotten higher relative to my saddle. We're seeing taller riser bars coming out from more and more companies. And there are riders out there like Dakota Norton who are clearly having success with higher handlebars. I am wondering where your grips are relative to your saddle height, and how has that changed for you over the years? Do you think that grips can still go higher, and what is the optimal drop or rise of grips from the saddle position for all-around trail riding? Thanks.
Well, this is a good question, if only because I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because it's not something I ever consider. I consider
Me either.
my handlebar height for descending, and where my saddle height for efficiency, and where the two end is normally about the intention of the bike more than it is about my preference. On an XC bike, it's probably the handlebars are probably a bit lower than the saddle. On an enduro bike, it's probably even to maybe a bit higher. Does anyone else have any input? Is that anything that you go for?
I just spun through all my recent photos on Pinkbike of review bikes, and they look similar in that the grips and saddle are about the same, but not. I don't have a metric for this. No.
Yeah,
How
it's
about you,
not
Jessie?
something I've ever got into the habit of measuring, but I've noticed, like, when I take photos of the bikes, that the saddle is basically the same height as the grips.
It would, in a way, it would make sense that as bikes have gotten steeper seat angles, like your saddle would be higher than the grips.
Yes.
As
True.
your pedaling height remains, or your pedaling distance, in a sense, remains the same, like sit bone to
Although
foot.
it will also force you to weight the handlebars a little bit more. So if you're getting like wrist discomfort from that, I know I will experience that on bikes with severely steep seat tube angles. You really notice that extra weight through your hands. So it can relieve a bit of that discomfort to bring the handlebar way a bit higher. But yeah, you're right. Like on a enduro bike, we're mainly positioning the handlebar to suit our preference when riding downhill. But like if you're someone who's really into technical climbing, you're maybe considering like how you're weighting the front wheel on those technical climbs. Like if you've got if your handlebar's really high so that you're comfortable, maybe if you've got back issues going along the flat, you're bringing that handlebar higher to relieve that discomfort. You might then feel like it's not that beneficial when you're going up like a steep technical climb, in terms of like trying not to loop out.
I think that the steep, I was actually speaking to Leo Conklin about it, and he was saying that when he really got into these steep tube angles, it was by putting a trail fork on a downhill bike, and he realized how much weight you could center, and that was sort of the watershed moment. And similarly, we talk about it a lot in trail bike reviews, where when you have a really steep seat tube angle, it can actually be really uncomfortable on undulating terrain, because it's all about keeping your weight centered and having the two relevant to each other. So when it comes to trail bikes, it depends what flavor trail bike you like, I suppose, and also your own comfort. But there is something quite nice about having that maybe slightly slacker seat tube angle, to an extent, not crazy slack, but 77, not 79 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then a slightly lower front, just to really feel like you can really carry some pace on the flat.
Having been on the 81 degree bike for a while now,
the TP geometry, yeah,
I don't mind it on flat terrain, but I do find that you're riding differently. Like you drop the saddle sometimes for
Do you mean in pain?
No, I'm so comfortable. I remain supple and relaxed on these long flat.
I remain supple. That is one heck of a sentence.
I wanted to one thing on his question. He mentioned Dak Norton and his handlebar height. I actually recently realized that his handlebars or his grips, I should say, aren't that much higher than other people. It's just that Mondraker's head tubes are like an inch tall, and so he has to compensate by running very high bars. He's not running a higher grip height than people by some crazy factor. It's just that he's compensating via bars as opposed to stack. And
2 other World Cup racers told me they had the same bar height, same grip height as Dakota Norton.
Yeah.
He was saying to me that he had so many spaces going on to raise his bar height that he started to become just concerned about what load that the bolts could tolerate.
Well, and he was hitting his chin bar. Like his helmet was hitting the stem.
It was, yeah.
Because the way that he rides. Yeah, and so it by making it just bar rise, he can have a little more clearance for his face between grips.
But also, there was a couple of years ago, there was a team that was struggling with issues with fork steerers because they were running such extreme drop crowns on such long steerers. There was so much force. Those World Cup bikes, they ride them so hard. It's just a whole nother thing. Cool. Let's go on to the next question. Hopefully that answers it a bit. It's basically, in short, I would say comfort is the most. Be comfortable on your bike. That's really, really, really important.
Up and down.
Up and down.
Bodily comfort and safety comfort are the two things.
I think, although not all of us as supple as Dario, we're probably in a lucky situation. I don't think any of us have any pre-existing back issues where we're really fine-tuning that relationship for comfort.
Well, you look at Mike's setup, and he's mentioned this before, he does have, he's had back injuries, and his setup isn't super drastic. I think it's quite similar to a lot of ours, actually. You don't need to go too extreme unless you do. I think that people maybe overcompensate.
That's Timmy drinking.
Nice. On to the next and final question.
Hey, gents. Thanks for the podcast thus far. Really been loving them. So I'm on a road trip from Brisbane to Tasmania in Australia, and I'm finding the variety of terrain in different mountain bike parks both interesting and challenging. For an amateur, though, who is mostly accustomed to loose over hard pack, what recommendations do you have to maximize enjoyment when riding in new terrain? I'm finding I'm spending more of my time focusing than having a good time. Cheers, and hope to see you in Medina.
Okay, this is a great question on 2 fronts. Because one, it opens up, as a general topic, I'd like to say how to make enjoying trails you don't know the most fun and the most safe, which I think is, there are things you can do. And secondly, just to his point, progressing and enjoying stuff that is loose, is rough, what would go. So start off, Dario, you like riding. I would say bad trails. You insist they're fun, which I respect.
I like good trails, for the record. I like all trails, but there's nothing I like in mountain biking more than riding a new trail for the first time. And it's such a treat because it turns your brain on in a different way where you're just processing what's happening. There's no foresight. There's no memory. It's just like a barrage of information. I love that feeling, and it's cool. New feelings, new sensations. I think in a way go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, especially when you're riding a real big, like a winch up, bomb down with some friends.
Yeah.
You're all riding way too fast.
It's a treat. I love it.
It is pretty nice.
It's a little
When
exciting.
I say bad trails, I mean that you guys like riding really weird rock stuff. But when you're talking about that stuff, it actually gets me going as well.
Only thing. I like everything. I mean, I don't shy away from any type of trail, I would say. Like I'll ride whatever there is. But I mean, I do seek out like weird, obscure trails whenever I can, but that's just for the novelty of it. I think in his case, like he's coming from a harder to ride trail condition into places that, by my understanding, would be friendlier. Like if loose over hard is what you're used to, the like Duffy, well-built, soft trails in Medina and the like seemingly grippy rocks and more bike parky terrain at Blue Derby would probably be easier to ride in a way, but different is always different. So it can take some adapting, I suppose.
Something I once got told by an enduro rider who really thrives in that blind style of racing was he was saying when he rides blind trails, he really focuses on dipping his heels and keeping his eyes up and just keeping those two inverse to each other, because the bike's just going to be more stable under braking, set up into stuff, and it kind of gives you a bit more time. It might not ring the bike in the same way as being that kind of a bit more reckless and a bit looser, but actually just keeps the wheels planted, and that's a really rewarding way. Jessie, what advice would you have for this person, how they can really enjoy these blind trails? And what do you think?
I think if your suspension is set up correctly, or like is behaving like within like a range that is acceptable, you should be able to have a good time on a wide variety of terrain. I think there are like some trails that will highlight a bad setup more than others.
They have those trails around here. That's funny. Every time I go out the front door. No, just kidding.
But all of your bikes are set up
highlights
perfectly.
a good setup yet.
Because you have telemetry, right?
It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
The turnkey.
I've got my telemetry kit back now.
Yeah.
Of Danger Dario, and I'm now gonna
get back into it. My one thing is on setup when you're going to a new place to ride is to not necessarily change the setup when you're there. I have done this before where I'll show up somewhere and I'm like feeling a little uncomfortable, and so I start twisting knobs and like changing too many factors just to get a little bit more comfort out of things. And for a while now, I've just stopped doing that, because being familiar with what you're riding is often better than trying to optimize some small detail.
Yeah, if you keep moving the goalpost.
Right.
Or chasing some unknown.
Yeah. And I think for like the safety element, like if you're on a road trip for 2 weeks and you want to ride every day, you can make small changes day by day, but don't drastically change it day one, have a big crash, and then not ride for the rest of the trip. So that would be my thing.
Jessie, do you like riding? Do you like riding blind trails? And is your best day riding something that you know and love really well, or rolling the dice and potentially just thrashing the living daylights out of a new trail, but also maybe having to ride a bit more reserved perhaps, or take it as it comes?
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever be thrashing the living daylights out of a new trail, riding it for the first time. But
when you say it back to me, it makes me realise how much I sounded like Basil Fawlty talking about his car. But that's just a different thing.
That's more about me than you. Yeah, it's exciting to ride a new trail, and you can ride in a way that will, like taking the outside line on corners, like most of the time is going to be like the safe way through something when you don't really know what's around the corner. And you will always, of course, like get caught out with situations like that. But it's fun to like take the gamble and to like feel that it paid off, and congratulate yourself for that. But no, like I enjoy just riding the same trail over and over and over again. Just because it's nice to feel that you've like just improved like a tiny little thing here and there, like maybe set up for a turn better, carry more speed through a section, like hop certain things that maybe you didn't last time. Like I buzz off doing that than going out to scare myself all the time.
There's this amazing, I mean, a lot of the resorts in the interior of BC, they'll have one top to bottom run that you can do at the end of the day where you hike for an hour or two and do like a 1,500 meter descent. And me and my friends were going around this summer, and it's about our third day of riding this. Like, I mean, some of it is like Mach 10, like flat out, going as fast as you can. And my friend was over from the UK, and he said, "But like as fast as like for me, like going as fast as I normally would, And he's like, Henry, how are you just going, like you're just committing over these blind crests, not knowing what's there? And I said, honestly, these trails are built so well, you can just really trust them. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry about it. Like it's such a thriving scene here. Everything's well done. And he was like, no. And I was like, honestly, man, like everything's fine. And I was just rolling the dice every single time, like being kind of reckless, but it was also, everything was working out, to be fair. Mm-hmm. And I kind of talked to him. I said, honestly, man, just trust the builder. They really know what they're doing. And he like literally 100 meters later, he just went gun ho over this edge. Just shit. Fuck. So hard. Like
you told me to trust them. Yeah.
Unbelievably hard. I know, yeah, pretty rough. So you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
But there is that sketchy feeling of that when your stomach just feels that bit lighter and you're getting away with stuff that is probably maybe the best feeling on a bike, to ride something new and ride it fast the first time, knowing perhaps you could never ride it that fast again.
Oh, it's a treat. I also, I don't find that I get like you do improve little things here and there, but I don't know. Sometimes it feels like you ride a trail best the first time.
Yeah.
I think that like you don't optimize, but you're like so focused, so in the zone that you do things that you wouldn't otherwise. Like if you walked a trail and knew it like perfectly.
Dario, can you remember what I said to you? So you came up last week, we went riding. Mm-hmm. We were talking on the way up about how frozen the ground was and how I was struggling to understand how the bike turned. Mm-hmm. And then can you remember what I said to you straight away after I ate shit really, really hard on that trail that I ride every day?
I don't remember exactly what your words were after some profanity, but there was a learning of a lesson, perhaps.
There was, but also that was on me, Dario. I was trying to show off. Because I knew this trail so well. I was like, hey, he's come all the way from Bellingham. I'm going to give him something of a show. And
he tried to shroud the shit out of a corner and just completely wiped out.
Dude, it was ice. There was no sharpening to be done. And subsequently, I'm very, very sore afterwards. But hey, that's okay.
Sorry.
That kind of wraps up the Pinkbike podcast with something of a cautionary tale about what's that film with Nicolas Cage, like my inoperable ego? We did that big film, the damning weight of like massive ego or something like that.
The crushing weight of immense genius or some shit like that. Yeah, it's
something like that. Right. On that note, it's a perfect place to leave it. Thank you very much for watching, listening, tuning in, getting your questions in. Please drop into the Pinkbike homepage and click on the article to leave your own message there. And we will see you next time.